How's everybody feeling? How's everybody feeling? Y'all alive out there? Okay. So I'm really honored and privileged to share space with you today. I think about how this is our first time that all our ancestral spirit is joined in this moment. My ancestors meeting your ancestors. This is a beautiful thing I don't take for granted. Also, I know that we are lied to 1 to 200 times a day, so I want to offer you a space of truth. So the next hour or so, I'll be telling you the truth, and hopefully that liberates us all. What encouraged me to write this book, I wanted to acknowledge our complex nature as Black people, particularly for me, how grief and joy can exist in one body. And also peeling back shame and addressing queer identities also, and also understanding the very real dangers of doing so when you walk into who you are as a person. So let's get to the reading. God whispers him up from that grief. Subpoenaed Black boy by his Nile River navel from depression's mouth. The cold adulation that arrived when your eyes were closed slipped underneath the bed sheets. Held fast the night of your flesh, God whispered him away from that ghetto sadness, brown skin curling up from the darkness. Spine dancing like chrysanthemum petals, finding their legs in winter. Slow but deliberate breathing. Joy surely comes this morning. Brown boy, stop allowing tears to know the lines of your face. Black boy needs to know the lines of your face do not have to crease. He has been running with nothing to be alone from. Eventually, the petals touch, the soul runs into the flesh itself. So I was talking to my friend Alicia Harris, but y'all gotta call her doctor because she out-educated. And I was conflicted about sharing some of these poems because I'm no longer this person that I wrote about. And she gave me the advice to, it's a creative freedom and allow the audience to partake in the journey with me. So I appreciate her friendship and the advice that she gave me. This poem is called The Opening. It is 2 a.m. in heaven, and all the ghosts are singing and playing spades. No one reneges in paradise. They laugh and holler, scraping joy from the bottom of their bellies, pretending they are back in their grandmother's kitchen. But she can't see them no more. She can see nothing at all ever since her beautiful brown boys bled out all over the block. Jesus, how many brown hands you need up there in heaven, singing about how good you've been to us. One of the things I really wanted to discuss was sexual assault and sexual abuse. Particularly, I wanted to free Black men from the prison and not being truthful about our sexual assault cases as well. So this is called This Is How You Take Your Body Back. And one of the most powerful tools that I incorporate into my poetry and what poetry requires us to do is tell the truth. The floor was a dirty wood, the room a closed eyelid, the door was locked. I am sure because no one knocked, no one came through it, someone would have come through it, right? To see, to stop the fingers from finding things we teach our bodies to hide. The sweat laid all over my body. I do not move. I become a clenched fist. A flood braces me into a thin line of thick questions. Is this happening? Is this body mine to give? Can a person still live inside the body after the soul stalls? I sleep for 2 decades. I forget, I say I forget aloud. I ain't forgot a thing. I cry, I read, I porn. I meet my body for a second time. I explode, I die, I die, I die. I high school, I church, I ask God questions, I steal my clothes, I chain my chastity, I religion, I self-blame, I riot, I forgive, forgiveness is the riot, I survive barely. I fight and wonder what virginity means for some of us who never got a choice. I don't know the language of survivors. How do you smoke as cologne? Can cologne hide the scent of trauma? It's been 2 decades. Water bubbles in my lungs. My dreams flood. The tide rises. It is not shot in black or white. Full color, the groping leaves me gray. Leaves me confused. I weigh a ton of feathers. My smile hides all of this. I think my eyes tells all my secrets. I steal my head. I am a haunted hue of colors. I bleed begonias, ITV, I Oprah. I hear Maya. Maya said the rape took her voice for 5 years. I see no men. I hear no men. They say fires like these don't burn black boys. Ain't I black? I am black, and I'm the only one that I know this has not happened to. I feel alone. I know I am not. We take back possession of our bodies when we tell the truth. Thank you. So I've been writing lately about how time works and our experiences with conversations that we have, and sometimes how regret can be very heavy. And I wanted to challenge the reader in this poem to imagine making the right choice or making the most loving choice. It's called Everything is Dry Again. Imagine your lips drawing back the word faggot onto your tongue like a nimbus cloud reaching for the rain. Now swallow. Everything is dry again. Your brother's cheek is not wet from your tears. His jaw is not slack from the cord he will soon wrap around his neck within the next hour after you call him the Minotaur, have the man you wanted him to be, with way too many horns to know how to lay his head comfortably on any bed or chest. Imagine him as myth, as fairy, as anything with a pulse that is not the darkest part of your father's shadow. It is 4:33 in the morning. You still have time to show him the sunrise. The suicide letter is still inside his body. You still have time to stop him from breaking open himself to find it, to use his blood as the ink. You still have time to love him, past yourself, before the door closes and he becomes low-hanging fruit from the ceiling fan. You still have 1 more hour with him, please. Thank you. So this is a combination of grief and celebration, this next poem. It's called Painted All Black. It's one of my favorite poems to perform. So let's go to it. Painted all black, the crisp color of your uncle's collarbone, the one who gargles Jim Beam, bronzes the ribs at family barbecues each summer as his daddy did and his daddy's daddy. Paint all of that shit black, auntie's pound cake, the cups of Crown. Al Green booming in the backyard, fling fingers full of your mother's favorite flower over fetid fields, where brown bodies are birthed in prayer, silenced in a spray of bullets, within seconds of showing no sign of being armed, but in full possession of blackness. A pasture where Tupac yells young niggas over a vintage vinyl, And all of the great space partners got a guaranteed spot in heaven's ghetto. Paint the deaf black, the weeping boy with the gnashing gold grill, so he cracks a smile while dying on the inside. The mother who hugs and holds her son's memory. He was only 22, his body an equation of bullets, 6 carry the 2. Sounds like the time 16 bullets were sent after Fannie Lou. Paint all of that shit black, the complicit silence, the protest of a pining people. Every notch that has lynched the breath from the neck of a nigga, the juke joints, where gangs and ghosts go to job all night long. Where necrotic paradise is looking for a home, a bed, a willing vessel. And the world shouts, show me your hands, your fro, your frightened but sizzling fist. Fox News shouts, show me your skin between the teeth of pit bulls and alleyways. Show us your glory in the hereafter once the nail box nigga. Show them your soul and your forgiveness. Rap about love. Sing about centuries of servitude. Make sure you paint all of that shit black, so they'll never forget that you have always forgiven them, no matter how many seats are left empty at your dinner table as the years pass by. Thank you. So the next 2 poems are about my father. So my sister's here in the audience, and I'm very privileged to have her to be here with me. So we had a very interesting childhood. And growing up, we didn't understand that our father was suffering from like dementia and different things like that. And so as a child, you don't know how to interact with trauma always. So a lot of times in my poetry, this is my way of parenting myself and also undressing wounds that we say have healed, but they still have that pus in it. And so poems allow me to pop the pus. So here we go. It's called Dancing on the Moon. And so basically I was 5, I think, when this happened. I had a shirt over my head and I was spinning in our living room and I hit my eye on the glass table and I had to go get stitches. Shirt silhouetted over my head, eclipsing the sight of living room to blind joyride. My body a nebula, alive with the shouting dance of the Pentecostal folks spinning, as so many black boys do, out of control. Carpet unfolding into dance floor. 5-year-old feet armed in battle, the language of twists and turns, natural. My mother was a runaway woman, passing along the ancient art of slipping from one place to another quietly. From dance to the bow, the encore, the sharp skirt of glass table, pulling my eyelid into flash pain. Moon passing over the trim of my father's voice. Sun beheld by percussive pain. Then father's arms turning darkness into day. A night wounding those invisible gangsters responsible for his son's fall. Thank you. How y'all feeling? Y'all happy to be alive? I'm happy to be alive. It's a blessing. So this is called Moon River in Oz. And then we're gonna give you some Sunday morning prayer after that. Because carefree means your father came back from the corner store with butterflies in his veins instead of glass. Breaking off inside his blood, dripping honey is the water that runs here when the food becomes scarce and the prayers don't reach up to heaven. Mother, cup me into the crease of your neck. Call me your Sunday morning prayer, please. I am tired of rehearsing how to drown. The tears are an ocean as the bed becomes a small boat, begging my body to wait for some other day to feel. The warm tease of your fingers holding me again in place on my pillow. When the dreams dress themselves in a train of veils, there is always someone dying, mother. There's always a headstone remembering someone's birth. Last night I dreamt you here, no needle marks in your arms or pain whispering its odor through your lips. Why you keep finding me, just to leave a question in your place. Willie, Father, you buried ghost. Your body is a room painted the color quiet. My mother's body once belched an organ to birth me. Her placenta still holds all the questions she never asked inside of her. I am 26 winters old and choose to be marvelous instead of heartbroken tonight. My teeth breaks the night like a wafer brings any man to my throat and claim this as Eucharist. Crawl through the gaps between God's fingers to get here, to witness what it feels like to leave a woman's body cracked open like palms, pressing on pecan shells in summer. Summer seduces us all. I have many mothers who belong to other children. But the one who tied her name around my ankles with chains of ink carries love in the arch of her back, with both knees bent. A forehead dressed in sweat knows what loneliness is and always leaves a spare key underneath her right breast to find it. This mother who says she is my mother, but ain't really and ain't fit to be nobody's mother, has a wall full of her children's pictures. And if you stare in their morning brown eyes long enough, you will see flakes of their soul floating softer than light inside the frame's body. In my childhood home, time crawls like bulrush baskets in cotton fields, smells deep-fried and unhealthy, moans with a mouth foaming with trauma. Miss Jackson has a wall full of her children's pictures, except one of my sister, my beautiful sister. She says she is her mother, but not really, ain't fit to be nobody's mother. My sister carries love like oversized breasts bending her spine. Our mother, but not really our mother, don't treat my sister well. She treats my sister so bad until she don't feel pretty no more, like a girl no more, or like she ain't worth loving no more. I wonder what it feels like to fall asleep and hear everyone around you dreaming, to hold your regret with both hands, to be a mother but not really a mother, ain't fit to be nobody's mother to someone else's children. Who do you blame when everybody can be anybody and nobody, and that means to be nothing at all but gray? So this poem is called When the Saints Go Marching, They Bring Their Sisters. I think we always idolize like the strength of men, but we never really focus on how it literally takes a woman's body to break open for us to be here, and how much they love us, and how they sustain us, and they mobilize us to be better people. And so this is for my sister. How many scars can fall onto the backdrop of a black girl's skin, making her tough? Walking with all that big bang in her chest, expectations on zero gravity after being let down again and again. I know more women who remind me of Tupac rather than the men that share the same skin and nose ring as him. My sister is a 5'4" compendium on revolution, an alleyway for the homeless, a summer of Sunday mornings for souls in search of a song. She is Lauren after the Fugees. Post-Beyonce will learn to black girl magic her lemons into lemonade. She is a Viola Davis type of sunray. No fence has enough wood or wire to become her prison. My sister has dissolved sorrow, birthed Kool-Aid smile in its wake, shaken the earth with her prayers. Her spine be miracle, all those tears be wonder. How many stars can dim to the light of her eye? Sky cracks its lips to laugh, the sun bows, the moonlight buckles its grace. When black girl swallows and owns the scars she never even asked for. Black girl pops gum, twist hair, got degree for her. I would turn an army of goons into ghosts, deadbeats into dust, because she has loved her brother into panther through pain. And this is going to be the last poem that I do, and then I have the honor of welcoming some of my friends to the stage. I always want to leave on a note of joy. I think that's our responsibility as not only poets but humans, to always encourage each other to keep living, to be our best selves, to keep loving. Stretch your arms wide, palms skyward, until every ocean you have imbibed pours forth. Set dynamite to the levees, bow down before God, demand forgiveness. The mirror will not splinter. There will not be a break-in before the blessing, a dampening of skin. Freedom demands sweat and a song we know all the words to. Lauryn Hill's I Find It Hard to Say. Love ain't got a bedroom but a church, an altar where the baptisms don't drown you. Bullets and bombs are circumcised into ash when trying to penetrate the stained glass windows, and no one cares if you smell like last night's weed or tomorrow's eulogy. We all trying to make it into heaven, hand in hand, with some glow on our skin, and maybe, if we are lucky, even a smile across our lips. Thank you. So we're going to move into our panel discussion, and I have the honor of introducing some phenomenal people. First, we have Dr. Jericho Brown, author of The Tradition, a finalist for the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the NAACP Image Award. He's an associate professor and the director of the creative writing program at Emory University. Dr. Alicia, okay, yeah. Now we have Dr. Alicia Nicole Harris, my upstairs neighbor, a poet, a linguist, and teaching artist. She received her PhD in linguistics from Yale University and her MFA in poetry from NYU. Alicia's debut chapbook, How Much We Must Have Looked Like Stars, won the 2015 New Women's Voices Series Prize. Alicia has spent over a decade performing nationally and internationally, including at the UN, the U.S. embassies in Jordan and Ukraine, the National Theater, and the legendary Nuyorican Poetry Cafe. She now lives in Atlanta, where she serves as arts and soul editor for Scallywag magazine and consults for various nonprofits. Currently, Alicia is working on her first full-length project, a collection of essays and poems dealing with theology, hell, and black holes. Last but not least, I have the honor of introducing Caress Dion, describes herself as a student. She has studied journalism and African American studies at the University of Connecticut. She has been studying fashion at Savannah College in Art and Design, and she recently studied the influence of culture on textiles while in Japan. Caress plans to open a consignment boutique this year in support of nonprofit organizations and entities caring for humanity.
So I'm going to moderate, and I might chime in from every now and then. But one of the things that, this panel is on art and activism, and that always makes me think of also this dichotomy between law and spirit. So art and activism, law and spirit, for you, are they always oppositional?
Can you hear me now? Oh, that worked. No, they are not oppositional. You know, I think in order for me to make a poem, I have to be working on myself because I have to tell the truth in order for it to be a good poem. So if I'm gonna write a poem, then everything's gotta be available to me. And if everything's available to me, and by that what I mean is when you start writing a poem, you don't know what the poem is going to require. It might need personal information. It might need this trivia, this fact you know about science. It might need an image that you maybe aren't even really that familiar with personally. But because I'm putting all that together, when I have to make something of it and I look back at what I've said, I also have to reckon with the fact that I said it. So often we write things down because they sound good, but then when you write something down that sounds good, you have to look at it and say, wait, is that who I am? I said it, do I mean it? And I think if we're in a position where we're saying, is that who I am? Do I mean it? Then we're also in a position where we have to service that, right? We start to act like what we've said. And if we're acting like what we say, then we're in an ethical position where we're moving toward ethics, we're moving towards a way of living, we're moving toward our own morality. So that's the way I think about art and activism. I think in order to make art, I'm always being an activist.
It's like you start a panel off with a question like that, right off the bat. For me, it's, and just generally speaking, I think a lot of things are heavy for me right now, as far as activism is concerned. Just briefly, I'll just say that I've just been realizing how sheltered of a life I've lived. And I think, you know, my parents have provided for me in a lot of ways, and I think in their minds, maybe sheltering me from certain things was to keep me positive. You know, I think about Will sharing his poems, and I think about him in general, and I think I hear these things that are so heavy and so weighty, and then I see you smile, and I'm like, how do those, it confuses me. How do those things go together? Because when not even having personally experienced certain things, but when I hear them, they break me and I don't feel strong. I feel weak just hearing. And so, to your question though, I think something that's happening for me, and I say I'm a student, and rather than saying, you know, what my profession actually is or what I feel very skilled at or whatever, I say I'm a student in the regard that I think I am really learning myself and being open to not have to tell myself what that person has to look like, who that person has to be. I'm learning people in not the standard that I have in my mind for what that's supposed to look like, whether it's based on different belief systems or whatever. And so I'm seeing art and activism right now as it's almost like a necessary challenge for them to go together, in the sense that for me, art may have always been an escape from things that are harsh realities. I want to do something fun, or I play basketball to get my mind off of whatever. But now it's just like everyone's experiencing life, and if we are turning to art for something, that let that something be healing. If I'm making clothing, what's behind it? Because otherwise it's just fabric. So for me, it's like I'm realizing they need to go together in order for me to be a true human, a good person. I need to find a way to bridge them, and yeah, so that's my long answer.
First, I would like to say, let's celebrate friends whose hearts break with us. Yeah, I think I have an outstanding community of people that love me and support me, and I'm grateful that God somehow has given me language, and I think art is just inherently activist work for me. I think about the intersections in which I exist on, being black, being queer, being all these different things, how can I not advocate for these things? Because when I make space for myself, I make space for other people. And so I think that's the petition. You know, I think about be fruitful and multiply. You want to see, you can't be fruitful if you don't know what the fruit is, right? And so my fruit is my agency, my body, and the stories that I have within myself. So I think they don't always have to be oppositional, but they must collaborate.
Can I add to that? I just wanted to say on something James said that made me think about the fact that, I mean, in truth, to be better at art, it's helpful to know more. I mean, the more you can know, the better you can be. And when you say that, people automatically think about reading, which I'm all for. I'm pro reading. Go reading. But there is the fact of experience, right? There is the fact of heartbreak. There's the fact of falling in love. There is the fact of, and in truth, when you know if you are telling the truth or you are sort of doing this deep dive into the self that writing takes or that making art takes, then you're also going to be where the people who are like you are, right? You're going to seek them out because you want to experience more of what, like, so what in me is in you, or what in you is in me. And I think that's part of where the politics comes in, right? So, you know, you're falling in love with yourself, you're excavating yourself, but you're also putting yourself in community. And when you put yourself in community, that which you say about yourself doesn't turn out to only be about yourself, right? Because you're suddenly, you become more aware that your feelings are shared feelings.
I like to live in the tension of things, so I love all of the answers. I think there's a way in which art is always prophetic. Like it's taking what is, materials, language, whatever, and it's putting them together in order to project something new, project something, or perhaps not even new, but to say a different thing, right, with these combined sort of materials. And then I think something about, and that's like a spiritual practice, even if you're a secular person, but I do think that sort of brings up some of these other spiritual questions. But then like the law to me is prescriptive. So we have this opposition between prophetic and being prescriptive. And we've all had, I want everyone to talk about sort of their training and their relationship to conventional sort of, traditions of writing or making or creating, and have those traditions, do you feel like they've hindered your creative process, or do you feel like they've expanded them, or are you using the traditions and finding like the loopholes or ways to break them and come up with new experiences through your art?
I think the key component that I always use in my life overall is like extending myself grace. So I extend myself grace in life and in my poetry. I never just say, oh, this is what I have to follow, because I think sometimes, you know, this is coming from someone that does not have a master's degree in writing, right, creative writing, but it's also me understanding that I have words that are valuable and that I have stories that are valuable, and creating space for myself and telling people who also feel as though they are poets, writers, and who do not have conventional education that they also have valuable stories and art making to share. So yeah, I don't go by convention at all.
I'll just say, I have an MFA and a PhD, and I thank God that I did that, but I know the root of me wanting to do that is the fact of the black church. And because I grew up in the black church, you know, kids in the black church aren't really allowed to be shy. And I mean, it's true that like as soon as you can speak, somebody's putting a microphone, they trot you up on stage and put in front of the church and put a microphone in front of your face, and you have to say an Easter speech, a Mother's Day speech, you got to be in a Christmas pageant. I mean, it goes from 3 to 18. And the more active your parents are in church, the more active you have to be in church, right? And then sometimes, you know, and I'm thankful for that too, sometimes that has to do with the insecurity of the parents. You know, my parents, the trouble my parents had ultimately have with me being a poet is that they don't know what the face is when people say, what is Trey doing? My parents call me Trey. What's Trey doing? People from Trey say, oh, how's Trey? And they're like, oh, he's a poet. And they don't know how to read that face. Do y'all know what I mean? But if they say, oh, how's Trey? Oh, he's a doctor. They know, oh, that face means I did right. I did okay. Oh, he's a lawyer. Oh, that face means, do you see what I mean? But I think all of that is the real training for me is the world that is sort of inside the world or outside the world that goes on in the evangelical church throughout this country. Because, if you're really involved with church, you don't have to participate with nobody else ever. Which is why people who are deeply involved in church can judge other people and sort of enabled to judge other people. Because, if you really are in church and you in church basketball, you on debate, you on the drill team, you in sewing, you can sing. And so you don't ever have to do anything. Y'all ain't never went to church, so y'all don't know. But you don't have to do anything in the world. And if you go to the right church, you don't have to go to school. You can go to school, to the church school. Do y'all know what I mean?
But isn't that sort of like higher education as well?
Yes. You could go to Oral Roberts University.
And then you just stay in university circles.
Our church owned a senior citizen. We had a senior citizens home. So cradle to the grave, if you didn't want to talk to no sinners, you didn't have to talk to no sinners. Do you see what I'm saying? So, but for me, I think that was the thing that began what turned into me becoming a poet. Because I knew that there was a conflict and a contradiction between that world and the real world I was seeing around me. I knew something funny was going on when people got pregnant. Because people that were 14 and 15 was getting pregnant. So how is this possible? Do you understand? This is magic. People are pregnant, wow. Do you understand what I mean? So I was always trying to reconcile those things, and I think doing the work of reconciliation is also the work of poetry. Do you understand what I mean? You have to figure out in your spiritual belief, so then what are you going to say about the rest of the world? How does that work in you? So I would say that the beginning of me, the traditional and non-traditional thing at once, because poets don't like to talk about God, at least this, right? They get real mad. But it really is the church and the fact that I wasn't allowed to be shy. I had to get up, and the black church is involved with poetry. So when I meet white poets, they're like, oh, what was your first poem and how did you get involved with poetry? And y'all don't know, but people used to know that it would be a 3-year-old saying Jesus wept and people scream. And then it would be an 8-year-old reciting the 23rd Psalms and people scream. But then there would be a 10-year-old who would recite Ego Tripping by Nikki Giovanni. And then you would get a speech and you don't know who wrote it. The lady who is the youth choir director at that moment wrote a speech, and you get that from a 15-year-old. Then it would go back to a 12-year-old who recites The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes. And all of that was in our churches in ways that it was not in other churches. And so I thought poems were a part of life. I had no idea that they were some sort of special thing. And that's the reason why they've always been a part of my life,
Caress, I want to hear from you, since you are not that you're not a writer, but you work in other mediums, so I would love to know how that works for you.
So I definitely say and I appreciate my professor from this summer who goes against tradition as it relates to fashion, and just inspired me and spoke into my life so much, just this idea of, because I come in with a journalism background, and but at the same time, someone who's always been a fan of fashion and loves sneakers and all that kind of stuff, and but not technically skilled at okay, well, do you draw very well? Do you sew very well? And all these technical things, and I'm like, no, but I feel something, and then I want to create something, and so I find, how can I put this together? Before I knew how to sew, I would just take a million safety pins and pin something together, and I'm like, that's it. That's what needs to be made. This right here. And then I'm like, at some point, I realized okay, I need to learn the art of sewing then, so that I can not be limited and not be able to do certain things. So it's there's a sense of tradition, okay, do you know how to do this? Because there's ideas that need to be, that need to go from idea to reality. And so there's some certain things that I have to learn how to do. But on the other hand, like whether it was my first drawing assignment for fashion sketching, and I'm like, I see the model that everybody draws, and I'm just like, but I don't want to draw that figure. Like, that's not realistic for me. That's not what I want to see. I want to see somebody that looks cool in the clothes that I want to create, and I don't know if she'll look cool in these clothes. Like, I don't know, because she's tall, slender, and there's nothing wrong with a beautiful, tall, slender person. But just like, why does it have to be that? And so I was just like, I'm gonna draw somebody that looks like me, that is not, or I want to use a model that's not super feminine, or whatever the case may be. And so I did that, and my teacher just encouraged me to keep doing that. Like, don't, and then as it relates to fashion, I took, instead of getting new fabric and making something completely, new, it's like, what's something that's already been made that maybe hasn't gotten its just due? And so I found old army tents and book bags and deconstructed those and made something new for the final project. And it's just like, even in doing all that, it's just, I think there's the good, obviously, to things that are traditional. Like, I went to school to take some classes to learn. So it's like, okay, I'm not knocking education in that traditional path at all. On the other hand, it's like, all right, I also want to learn I want to learn some other things. So I'm going to get a job working at a boutique and learn how consignment works. That's not, somebody may ask, well, how much you getting paid? Or is that going to lead to a higher position for, all those things. It's just like, I'm carving some things out here that are not traditional, because what I want to do isn't traditional, So like, maybe I can't follow the traditional path and just end up, so.
That kind of argument to me feels very anti-capitalist in a certain way, because you're not aiming towards a kind of product that you can sell. And I feel like so much of education is like, I got a degree, and that carries weight, as opposed to, I learned a set of skills that can help me do things in the world and create new vision. And so, that resonates with me so much. Thinking about, and I think it applies to our artistic process. Like, as we're writing, as we're creating, as you're making clothes, beyond the thing, the goal, the object, the poem, or the pants, what are the questions that are guiding your process? What are the questions that you're wrestling with as you create things along the way?
I think it's always about truth-telling, right? Am I telling the truth? And also, is this going to push us towards a higher form of our humanity, or get us closer to it? And how do we express the way we feel? Like, I think the superpower that poetry has is authenticity. I can talk, trigger warning, I can talk about rape through poems, and it can connect with people, but it takes a high level of vulnerability to allow someone to see you to do that. And so it has to be truth-telling. Not only is it your truth, but the imagined truth. Also, we can't limit the imagination's ability to invite something else to happen. So I'm not talking about factual truth. I'm talking about the possibility of the truth happening, and the imagination, the breadth of the truth.
You didn't answer my question, though. What questions? What are the questions? So, is it true? Okay, is it true? Okay.
Jimmy got in trouble. I know, right? Is it my turn? You looking at me? Oh, Lucia, you're such a hard moderator. I will say that I ask, I'm always trying to test what love is and how far it can go. So I think line by line, I'm sort of asking, do you, Jericho, I'm mostly just talking to myself, like, Jericho, is that what love really is? Do you really love that? Or did that is that an experience of love that you had? You know, like I'm sort of interested over and over in all of my books, just interested in where love intersects with violence and why it does. And I'm interested in where love turns to fear, or how people have certain kind of fears about love, and they try to protect love through violence or through other sort of awful means, and then therefore the love gets tainted with something else, and then therefore is not love anymore. So I'm sort of asking always, you know, do you love it? Is this love? And I think I'm also trying to see, I'm asking questions, you know, that turns out to be the question, but I don't know how conscious I am of that question. I sort of see that question having written however many poems in my life, right? I think when I'm writing, I'm really trying not to think, which is to say, I'm only thinking, do I like that? Does that turn me on? Am I attracted to that sound? Does that sound good? Does that line have meaning? Do you understand what I mean? And not even does that line have meaning like, oh, I understand it, but does that line have meaning like something about the sound of that line sounds like I'm gonna say, after I read it to myself. And so I'm not really, it's not until I'm revising that any of my poems make any sense anyway. So those are the questions I'm asking in a first draft.
So, yeah, this is evolving for me. Coming from like a sports background, playing basketball, a lot I think is about what are the results, you know? So how many points did you score? Did you guys win? You know, those kind of things. And then even in academics for me, it was about, did I end up with an A? And so I think something that has been difficult with fashion, and it could be with art, period, that becomes a product, is that it's like, does it sell? Does somebody buy it? You know, like, and so I know for me there's that wrestle with like, there was something on my heart or on my mind that I wanted to express that it made me create something. And that moment of creating I'm asking myself, was I true to myself in the vision that I had for it? Was I even, you know, it started in terms of thinking through like, what's loving in what I'm doing? And when I say that, it's like, meaning, am I thinking of, I want to create something that's lasting for someone, so I want to make a good pair of pants, because I don't want to find the cheapest fabric and throw something together and call it pants. Like, sure, the denim may be more expensive, but they can have that denim forever. It's reliable. It's one less thing to worry about, or you know, sometimes it's like, girl, it's just clothes. But for me, I think I start thinking through those things. How are those people who are in the factories making the clothes, how are they not just contributing to the wealth of the designer and these big fashion houses, but what benefit are they getting from this? It's just so much in that. And so I started asking myself, you know, things like that. But like I said, it's difficult when there is that connection with, okay, you can do all that, but then does it sit? Does nobody buy it? Was it too expensive? Was it not? You didn't put it on a celebrity, and the celebrity didn't wear it, so there's no hype around it, so nobody's buying it, so it doesn't matter. You know, I'm connecting with the idea of like, why can't I just express something? I think because you have to buy materials and all that when you're making fashion, as opposed to there's if maybe, and then I'm not saying there's not a extensive process, but if you write a poem and you want to put your poem out, you write it, and there's work in there, and there's things invested. But I mean, for me, people even can like, how much did you have to pay for that? Then you went in, how much money did you have to put in to go share your art? And then it becomes, does it even each other out? Do they even out? Did you get a return on your? And so I'm trying not to let those questions
Yes.
stay in my mind so much. Even going to Japan, my aunt originally asked me, so are you gonna have a job waiting on you when you get back? Because this trip costs like $10,000, all this stuff. This trip is expensive. You're going to study. Is it a job when you get back? And and I'm like, yeah, that's the job when you get back. And I'm like, I don't know what's in store for me when I get back, but I know there's an entire part of the world that I've never seen, and I admire Japanese denim, and I'd love to experience the culture and the people that make, and I went, and it has been revolution, like for my life. It's just, there's so much that I can barely finish sentences because there's so much that I got from my experience there. So yeah, I think even asking myself what the experience is in the process of creating art is maybe more important than whatever the product ends up being, or do I get a job at the end of it, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I think another question is this push me in my faith? Because I think artwork is constantly taking leaps of faith, because you're taking the time out to produce something, and just hopefully it makes an impact, even if it's not a profitable or quantifiable result in the end. It's just like, hopefully someone leaves this room impacted, right? And I think that's always faith work and artwork are together.
It's like trees.
Go ahead.
The things that we're making, even when you make clothes, you have a durable thing, but the feeling that people get from that really isn't about, it kept me warm, or I'm not wet, or, do you understand what I mean? The feeling is something that you can't put a price on. That impact thing that Jimmy's talking about is something you can't put a price on. And so it's like trees.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a tree. Many of us don't think we care about trees, but nobody wants to live in a world where they don't exist.
Yeah.
And I think that's how poems are, that's how art is. We think, is that a job? And yet everybody actually wants to walk by art that they get to ignore all day. Nobody wants bare white walls everywhere. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? And if you take all the art away, even just coming to this building, we pass by so much art on the street. And you take all that away and people would be mad.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
But I think what we're also talking, so for me, so much. So I remember a poet who I deeply respect, who serves as an editor, emailed me and was like, hey, the press that I work for really wants to, publish one of your, some of your work. So what are you working on? What's next? And I was like, I'm writing a book of essays on hell because I'm interested in the notion of can violence be redeemed? And I never heard back from them, right? And then I felt all this anxiety because I was like, I know that I have to write this, that there's no other thing for me to write. I could write other things, but I'd be playing. And I'd be lying. I'd be lying to everyone else. And so I'm like, I'm writing this thing that I feel like is wildly unpopular, just as a concept. I'm like, but I know that that's the thing that I have to make. Because that's what has integrity for me. And that's the true question that I'm really wrestling with, that I think I've been wrestling with all my life. But then there's this notion of you're writing into a time or into a period. And so it's like, when you know that, it's like, how am I using my skill to affect real change in the world? But then you also have to have, as you said, this notion of faith, which says actually I might put something out into the world that doesn't do anything for 30, 40, 50, 100 years. I might never actually see what it actually does, right? But that doesn't mean that just because in my particular circle, in my particular time period, it doesn't have a deep resonance, it doesn't mean that it will not have resonance at some period in time. And that is like a work of faith, and also of understanding like your implicit value as a creator. Like, no, people are like, oh, I don't want to work, I don't want to live in a world without art. And I'm like, well, then you need to start paying artists for their work. Like, I mean, the question about, well, can you get a job from that? Can you get a job from that? Does that pay money? Does that pay money? I remember being in middle school and getting my little fortune told, my little 25, Alicia finds out poetry doesn't pay the bills. And I was like, well, why wouldn't it pay the bills? I come home and I live, eat, breathe this. I wrestle with this. This is my craft. I'm like, you wouldn't walk into a store, or a restaurant, eat a meal, and then be like, nah, well, some of you might, but you know, like, be like, nah, I'm out, and not expect to pay a bill. Like, why would you not pay me for my work as an artist? And it's this weird sort of tension, because you would do the work anyway, without the money, right? I would do it anyway. I would write.
Yeah, Whitney Houston would have sang without the money, too,
exactly. Thank you, but everybody paid her. So, sorry, there's no question. Just pay your artists well. That's just a plug.
This is interesting to me because, you know, people say, you know, there's no way around these things, and you know, if you want to write, if you want to make something, if you want to paint, if you want to dance. These will always be the questions, but also people do live, you know, people do live, breathe, and die following their passion for this stuff, you know, and we have an example. People like to pretend that there's no history of black art in the world, but there's a history of black art in the world in every genre of art. And so we have an example of people who have given their lives to these things, and who made it work. And as long as we have that example, you know, it's not like we're being ahistorical. You know, we're being historical. And if you have an example, you can do anything. You know, and if you have an imagination, you can do anything else. So that's what I have to say about that. Like, you know, it gets real. We were actually talking about this the other night, about how I'm fascinated. I'm not saying this in any shady way. I am fascinated that the same people that there are people who can see a Tyler Perry, Medea Goes to School film, and those very same people can see Barry Jenkins's Moonlight and not really see a difference. That's true. You know, people will go see both of those things and be like, oh, I like that. Oh, I like that too. Do you know what I mean? And when you're really trying to do the kind of work that I'm trying to do, that sort of message from folk can be very stressful. You know what I mean? But then it's not like I'm capable of doing the other thing. You know, I think part of the reason why Medea can't exist is because somebody is capable of making. I actually have no gift for that. I wouldn't be able to. Do you understand what I mean? So I think if we think about what our capabilities and what our inclinations and what our predilections are, then we end up exactly with what will feed us, you know, literally and figuratively.
So when both of y'all were talking, I was just thinking about, it's like art and creativity are for us, the artist, the creative, that's, you know, but then it's also not, in the sense of, I mean, it's not just, maybe that's a better, and I think about, so for me, something that I'm intrigued by or interested in is like vintage clothing. And so one market right now that is like a big deal is like if you have old rap t-shirts from the 90s. Like, and when I say rap t-shirts, it's like, it can literally be a rapper was on it, it could be a civil rights leader was on it, it could be just something from the 90s that looks old, messed up, that probably you could get it on the corner from some guy for like, or at the gas station for like $10. Now they have whole shops dedicated to selling these shirts for like $200 each, right? So, and the more worn in the condition of the shirt, the more valuable it is, and there's all this, and I'm totally into this world. Anyways, but what's so crazy is I can't help but think about, and this is who I try to tell my family about when they're like, if they ask me, is this gonna turn into a job? Or if they, whatever the question is, it's like, it's so funny that the guy who people were probably saying, oh, he's not doing nothing, he's an entrepreneur, he says he's an entrepreneur making these t-shirts, like back in 1990 something, right? These shirts that he's selling on the corner for $10, or they're not even selling, you know, whatever. Now, what he made, we are 30 years later saying, oh, this is dope. I'm sure there's people designing stuff, going to school for all these amazing creations and all that, but I'd rather spend my $200 on a shirt from a guy who got on the computer, did some clip art, put something together, and that may sound crazy, but I think I'm saying that, like, just in perspective of who art is for, and or the idea of having a Basquiat who wasn't appreciated and now his paintings sell for so, you know, it's just like, that's something that I'm thinking about for myself, but I think is helpful when you think of life being bigger than you and beyond you, and even beyond what you'll see, the time that you'll live. It's just so much. So I don't know. I just in what you all were saying, and I'm thinking, speaking to myself and maybe to others, just this sense of, if you are creating or whatever work it is that you're doing, if we live in a world where you can go on Instagram and it's taken somebody a whole week to plan an entire photo shoot, and all that someone has to do is open their phone, see it, like it, scroll to the next thing, scroll to the next thing. It's like, you have to know that your work and that what you're putting in can't be measured right now. You actually can't probably get the full benefit of it. It's just not, yeah, probably, I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah, what y'all were saying just took me there.
So what's the role of art in terms of creating sacred space? The word sacred literally just means set apart or set aside. So how does art help us create, in a world that's constantly so fast-paced, where we're just scrolling from image to image, where we're living moment to moment, how does art help us, does art create a space potentially for pause or meditation?
I think that it requires, even on a subconscious level, participation. Like you said, like if we were to walk into this building and there was no architectural, designs to it, just like it was just plain square, we wouldn't be engaged. So as soon as we walk up the steps and we notice like the arches and all the different things, we're automatically artistically participating into the space. And so then that preps you to enter into this room where conversations are happening, right? So yeah, I think art demands for a certain participation of the self, reflecting how is this building representative of me also. We see all the different artwork inside this institution, whatever, and that also is like, we have so many different things within us, and how do we allow people how do we invite people to encounter those pieces of us? So yeah, I think it requires participation and engagement. And then once you engage with it, how do you share that? And that goes into the mobility and sustainability of art.
It did. Don't be shady. I live upstairs. Yeah, so I wanted to, does anybody have any further, oh, maybe I'll ask, so I've asked about the questions that you are wrestling with now, and now I'm gonna ask you a very capitalist question. What are you working on next? Like, what are you doing next?
So I'm working on another book. It's called No Orchids for the Boys. It's another book of poetry. And yeah, it's just my next project. As I grow and as I allow myself to experience different things, I want to write about those things. A few years ago, my life was not, I won't say enjoyable, but I can write more about love now. I can write more about, traveling. I can write about these things. Me and Alicia had this conversation. It's so important to not always pull from grief. And when you're an artist, that can be so addictive, especially when you're a poet. You always talk about the sad moments or the moments that break your heart. We have to learn to tap into the reservoir of joy and talk about, that's why I was like, y'all alive? Y'all happy to be alive today? Like, because there is a very real possibility that you will not be here. And I think it takes a moment to step back and acknowledge that, I'm breathing. Like even right now, just take a second to realize I'm inhaling, I'm exhaling, I'm actively participating in life because it's a thing that you won't be, one day.
Correct.
I am opening a consignment shop. And so basically, the way I see it, just in brief, I know that there's and when I say consignment, that specifically means the difference between that and just a regular thrift store is that for me, the goal is for people to realize that their clothing is an investment. So when the idea that, okay, I'm not wearing my clothes anymore, but I paid however much money for them, now do they just sit in my closet? I think there's ways that you can contribute back to other people you can obviously give those clothes away, but I also feel like there's still life left in those clothing. And so the idea is people bring in their clothes they're not wearing anymore that are still in good condition, or for whatever reason they don't want them anymore, just because people go through phases and you're like, I don't really like that anymore, but somebody else is just entering that phase of wearing all black, so they want all your black clothes. But yeah, the idea is you bring your clothes in, and when your clothes sell, you get paid. I get paid to keep the business going, but you get money for it. And it really is about like, there's money that people could be like, especially when I think about black people and I think about how much we love to dress, it's just like, we have money in our closet, and it took me having to be in different situations, pursuing my dreams, where I'm like, I don't have any money, and then I just go in my closet, and I'm like, but I got those, I got those, I got those, I got that, all right, and then I'm like, well, I need quick money. If you need quick money, you're not gonna think about going on eBay or selling online, because I need my money today. Probably because maybe I haven't been the most responsible or whatever the reasons are where I need the money. But anyways, whatever situations you get in where you feel like you need money. And I would have to go to a local store and they only give me pennies and they're gonna sell it for a huge profit. And I start realizing that and I'm just like, no, like people they're bringing this in because they need money. Like, and I'm gonna make a lot of people. They're gonna make a lot of money off of me, and it's just like signing a bad record deal or something, So I'm trying to change that in the world of fashion by showing the remaining value in clothes, but also being able to show people how they can build up stock in what they're buying when they buy things that are well made. So, yeah.
And taking care of it when they have it.
And taking care of it when you have it. And then that in brief too, the idea is I know I'm a type of person, when I find out about something, I'm like last night, my friend FaceTime Will because I had this realization about something I didn't know was happening in the world. And I'm like, what are we doing about it? What are we gonna do? And like I do that all the time, like, okay, what am I gonna do? And then I've worked in English Avenue mentoring kids, so it's like there's moments where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go in and do something, and then there's moments where it's like, they need money to get this going or to put them on their feet, and so then I just like, I wanna make as much money as I can possibly make so I can give as much money away as I possibly can and still live, you know? So that's what I'm up to.
Yeah, I'm working with Dwayne Betts and Kima Jones on a prison tour, and we're doing an initiative where we go to prisons all over the country, but we're making a book of poems that are for and about these people that we meet. But you know, I am doing that, but I don't know if that's, and I'm writing these essays about poetry and about what people would call cultural criticism, I guess. So, I don't know. I've been on tour. Like, I was in 3 cities a week from March 16th to Thanksgiving. So I really don't know, you know, and I'm still on the road. I'm on the road. You know what I mean? Like, I'll leave here. I mean, I'm here now, and I'll leave Thursday. And when I leave Thursday, I'll be back one day. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? So when life is that way, I can't really see the passion for writing in front of me. I just have to hope it's still there. I have to trust, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm on the road. I'm doing that part now. So.
Well, I help run a magazine called Scalawag, and it is about radical politics in the American South and art, culture, politics, and movement organizing. So that is the thing that I've been doing for 3.5 years, and I will continue doing it. Which just helps. Will's been published in it, actually. His essay is featured on one of the covers. And I feel like that is really meaningful work because as a writer, as an editor, I get to encounter so many people's work, and specifically in media where a lot of Black and brown folks either don't have the traditional training or people reject their stories or their story angles. I feel like Scalawag is a place where people can come and be like, I want to write a story on this. I want to write a story on the NCAA and labor practices. And we're like, okay. It's like, but I don't have any journalistic training. And we're like, okay, well, we'll work with you. And we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until, you know, we get a piece out of it. And for us, it's really good because it's like we get a story that we would have not had, but this author who maybe didn't have the experience now has a byline in our platform, and we're hopeful that if they continue writing, they'll get a byline in another publication and another publication, and so can begin a career in journalism or begin a career in criticism or and so that's a really important project to me. I'm also working on this book of essays, which we don't know what it's going to be. And then, thinking about maybe moving to a very small town in Texas, Corsicana, to do some kind of arts organizing work with the aim of racial reconciliation in a very segregated town in rural Texas. So that's what I'm doing. So where can people follow you if they want to hear more about your work? Just a quick thing, because I want to open it up if people have questions.
I'm only really accessible on Instagram at Mr. James Poetry.
Instagram, Twitter, Caress Dion. That's me.
My Instagram handle and Twitter account is Poppy in the Wheat, like a flower in a wheat field, Poppy in the Wheat.
Yeah, I mean, I got a bunch of email addresses. They're all public. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm like the easiest person. I mean, if you really want to find me, you can find me. It's always funny. People be like, oh, we'd love for him to come. And then somebody tell me in the street, oh, they want you to come. I'm like, oh, it's so difficult to get to me.
Yeah, I DM'd you one day.
Yeah, all you got to do is just send me a message. And generally, you know, I do whatever people tell me to. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, like, James was like, hey, let's hang out. I was like, okay, so then we was hanging out. You know what I mean? So I don't really, it's this funny, weird thing. I was just actually on the way here, I was on the phone with this guy who is applying to MFA programs, and he sent me this message, and he said, I want to ask you some questions about UNO. I went to UNO, University of New Orleans, and he said, what did you think? And I typed in, and this really, I can't, I'm too old. I just can't. It just stresses me out. It's just like my anxiety level. As soon as I start doing it, I get real nervous. So I sent him a message back, and then he was like, oh, but I have some more specific questions. And I'm like, so this sounds like, so I typed, this is starting to sound like work. You can just call me. Mm-hmm. Or no, I said, I'll just call you. And he said, great. And then nothing happened. And then he sent me this message, and he was like, so do you want to call me over Instagram, or do you want to call my number? Like, this was like a day later. And then I was like, what? I don't even know how to call you over Instagram. I thought that was strange. And so then,
What was the question?
then he sent his number. Well, he said this other thing. Then he finally sent his number. And then I called him. And then he asked me his questions, and I answered him. And then at the end of the conversation, he was like, this was really too easy. I was like, I know. That's about and y'all know, I mean, I'm serious about this. That is actually about as easy as it can be. A lot of things we want, we can get if we ask for them.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff y'all don't even, y'all, me, whoever, just ask. What people gonna tell you? No. You already living in no. No can't hurt you.
I do live in no.
You already live, before you ask, you are living in no. So after you ask, if you get a no, your life hasn't changed, so you ain't did nothing wrong. But if you get a yes, you only got it because you asked.
Yes. So what Jericho is saying is
I'm
that
sorry, I tell him all the time.
You can message him, email him.
You can ask me out on a date.
Yeah, you know.
As long as you pay.
Yeah. So if you guys have any questions for any of the panelists, there are 2 mics, one there and one there. And we'll just close out with some of y'all's questions if you have any for us. Also, let us know your name, because that's way more personal.
Okay, well, my name is Elizabeth. Hello. So my first question is, how, if you had any, did you fight against art insecurity?
Oh, I fight against that every day. I don't think I've won that battle. And I think but all that is to say that it gets stronger the more you give into it. So there will be, after I put out my first collection, chapbook, and then, I moved and I was in grad school and I was doing all this other work that wasn't poetic work. And I just didn't have it in me to write those kinds of things. And then my voice was beginning to change as a poet, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't know why I was writing differently, and I didn't like what was coming out. And then I started to judge it, and then I was like, nobody will read this. And that's the kicker, when you're like, nobody will read this, who is the audience for this? I can't envision them. And so then I would just stop, and what became an everyday practice easily, I will write every day because that is my natural rhythm. It started becoming, okay, once a month, okay, once every 3 months, okay, it's been 6 months and I haven't written a poem, okay. And I would get into this question where I would ask myself, am I still a writer? Am I still a poet? Because I haven't written, I'm not writing. I can hear my ear changing. I can see the gap between what I can write and what I would desire to write growing. And then you become insecure and then you stop doing it. But I think for me, what I realized was my gifts, right, are things to be stewarded, not to be exploited. And if it's me stewarding my practice, it doesn't matter how insecure I am about it, because it is my responsibility to invest, because I have already been given. I've been given a gift. And so I put energy and time and care and training into it, because that is how I show gratitude to the one who gave it to me. and the people who believed in me and gave me, spaces when I was younger, or my mentors or whatever, I still continue to do that. And as you stop thinking about the product that you're gonna get out of it, and you're just saying, this is just me being faithful, then new possibilities open up, and then you become excited again about the process of potentially growing something.
And then, sort of, I mean, so conversely, and in line with that and conversely at the same time, I mean, sometimes we're calling things insecurity, but maybe it's not necessarily insecurity. Maybe it's a challenge to yourself to learn to do something you want to do, which takes time. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're a basketball player, like when I look at basketball, I'm like, wow, a basketball player, look, whoa. Do you know what I'm saying? But then like if you listen to the people, every time a season starts and some famous basketball player's playing, you hear the people talking the whole game. They're like, oh, and he's been working on his jump shot. I'm like, that's a grown-ass man working on his jump shot? He already a basketball player. He got the first check. Do you know what I'm saying? He been working on his three-pointer. Oh, he's working on his three-pointer? So I can work on my metaphors. I can work on my endings. I can work on iambic pentameter. I can see how that works for me. I can work on sonnets. Can I write a sonnet? Let's see if I can write a few sonnets. Do you understand what I'm saying? And if you can have that constant conversation with yourself, that's not the worst thing in the world, because then you always have work to do as an artist. Do you understand what I mean? And we know this from everything we love. Y'all remember when Serena was playing the game and she like went into the split? She like hit the tennis ball in the split and y'all was happy, I was happy. But then right before that, if you also remember, there were all these pictures of Serena Williams doing all these splits, like with the bar way up here. Y'all remember that? Y'all don't remember because y'all not obsessed with Serena Williams. But it's because she was doing all those splits that when the ball hit, because she had planned, sometimes that ball is so low, I need to be able to fall down to get it. She had that on her mind already. So that's why do you follow what I mean? And so you have to put, if you're an artist, of any kind. My students love to talk to me about Beyonce, and I'm like, y'all really like Beyonce, but none of y'all want to live that life. You like the way that looks when you watch what is it called, Homecoming. You're like, oh, that look good. Try to live that life. Try to do that from January. You know, Homecoming is one night, but try to do everything that led up to Homecoming. Holding the notes and turning flips. Don't nobody want to do that in real life. At the same time, I mean. Do you know what I'm saying? And if you do that, that means you must have been doing some work to lead to that, which is why it's so important to be doing what you love, because then you don't mind doing that kind of work.
And I always tell you, patience, right? An orchid doesn't starve as an orchid. We all are like budding in this process, and so like during these stages, make sure you're doing the necessary things to be the best orchid you can be, watering yourself, making sure you have adequate sunlight, sharpening your techniques, and just being patient and extending yourself a copious amount of, grace.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important.
Orchids are hard to take care of, man. You have to talk to them every day. You have to talk to orchids like all day. It's like, okay, I'm talking to y'all. Stop acting crazy. Thank you.
Go ahead, because everybody else is being quiet and introverted, but that's okay.
All right, let me stop joking. Okay, and so speaking of that, what sacrifices have you guys made for your art throughout life? Can I go get my pencil?
I'll answer that question. So I was overseas doing government contracting, making a lot more money than I'm making now. But I knew that what I was doing wasn't satisfying me, it wasn't fulfilling me. I knew I wanted to share these stories. And so I quit my job. And came to be broke, to advocate for myself. And I think some people just look at people like Beyonce, and oh, she's amazing, but she says that she's willing to take a chance on herself. And so every day I wake up and I say, am I willing to take a chance on myself? Am I able to collaborate with God in the plan that he has? And it takes, like I said, it's artwork, it's faith work, and that's why truth telling is so important too. Tell yourself the truth about how you feel about situations. If you're in these jobs that aren't making you happy, oh, I'm not happy, confess that. Confession sets the person free. So,
In a weird way, I feel like I've never made a sacrifice, in the sense that, I mean, yes, in the sense like you mentioned, like being broke and all those things. No. Let me try to, because I'm not saying that what you did wasn't sacrificial or what we're doing, because you know I'm doing it too. I guess what I mean is like, I think it's gotten to a point where I'm like, I have no choice. If I'm gonna be true to myself and live the life that I believe I'm supposed to live, like yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, so in the actual essence of what the word is, yes, I make the sacrifices in terms of, okay, I had one job, then I went back to school because I wanted to learn fashion, because I wanted to do something, and so that meant that I had to leave my full-time job and get a part-time job and manage both. But it's like, I did that for peace of mind. I did that for peace of mind and for me to fulfill what I'm here for. And so it's like, it almost is like, yeah, it's a gift to myself. Or if I think about playing basketball, like I think of it because I relate it back to playing basketball, and it's like, well, what kind of social life did you have, like, when you were growing up? And I'm like, I didn't. What do you mean? Like, I play basketball in the winter, spring, summer. I play AAU. I play this. I play high school. You know, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh, so you really missed out on a lot. And at the time, or even just thinking about it, it's like, no, I loved basketball. I didn't miss out on anything. Like, that was what my heart was. So I didn't know. In retrospect, I could have had a bit more balanced life, but so I'm not, saying overextend yourself in that regard, but just, I think for me, I'm starting to see it as like, or if I feel like I'm losing something, then it's kind of like, well, what was actually attached to that I feel like I'm losing? Is it a loss, or is it, I do have to try to walk in this newness and faith that I know this life, but I don't know what it's like to keep saying yes and be honest with myself. So yeah, that's my answer.
I think I had to give up the fantasy and the life that I was living, that I was not going to fail. I was always incredibly good at school, and I continued to pursue the things that I was good at because I was good at them. And then I got to a point where I was like, I cannot keep writing these poems because I don't want to write them. I don't care who wants to listen to them. I don't want to write these poems anymore. I don't love this. And I feel like in a very candid conversation that I had with God, I felt like God was like, well, if you love it, can you learn to love it differently? Like, can you learn to be okay with learning that, like, actually the thing that you are not going for is not perfection, not the stellar, I did not fail, I look wonderful. But like, can you learn to be okay with risk? Learning to write, as Jericho said, can you write a sonnet? Well, failing at the sonnet,
That's how you learn to write the sonnet.
20 times before you write one that's kind of maybe okay.
And then you ain't got but one.
Exactly, and then you don't have one. And so, right, it's like, I gotta submit this one poem everywhere because it's the only good one. And so, yeah, learning to be okay with failing. And so my process was like, I took up for a brief time drawing because I was like, I need to learn how to be bad at something. And I am not a good visual artist. Therefore, I'm going to learn how to be okay and grow in that and hopefully translate that to writing.
Yeah, I can't really narrow this down enough to answer your question. So I'm gonna let that, I just feel like this country and its people are so cruel to black and queer people. And I feel like black and queer people are so cruel to black and queer people that I don't, or can be at least, right? I don't really You know, I feel like I've lost my parents behind trying to be a poet. Like, I feel like I've lost family members. But, like, so, you know, in terms of sacrifice, whatever that is, I guess I imagine what I gained from that is truth. And what I found out about that is the stuff that we don't like to face about our so-called friends and family. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know that I sacrificed anything when I gained everything. You know what I mean? But on what was just said a second ago, I think it's really important just to remember that anything you're good at doing, you were not good at doing it the first time. And so, you know, somebody in here can cook, I imagine. Somebody in here you can cook. You can cook so good, you probably think you can get a ring for it. You know, really, it's some dish you can make. But if you think about the first time you made it, that shit was nasty. But you didn't like stop cooking. You didn't starve. You kept cooking till you got that dish right, and now you think you can get a ring for it.
So what is the subject and objective of your art?
Wait, what? What's the
So
what?
what is the subject and the objective of your art?
The subject and objective. Oh, the subject of my art is love, and the objective of my art is love.
The subject of my art is God, and the objective of my art is worship.
That's a good question. I'm gonna borrow from a Malcolm X movie, because I don't know if he actually said it, but Denzel said it. And he said that he uses the X as his last name because he's a man in search of his last name. And so, you know, in redefining what that meant. And so I think for me, that changes with what is pressing on my heart, you know? So I think at the root of it, at the bottom is love. But I think I'm still figuring out, like, what does that even mean? What does it mean? What does love even mean? You know, so yeah, I would say I'm an artist in search of that in some ways, constantly.
So I'm just in awe of God constantly. I was talking to a friend, and I was just saying, like, I'm amazed that we get to participate in this experience. It humbles me to the point where sometimes words are not adequate, because what's the likelihood of us being here in this very moment, you know? The intentionality of God blows my mind. And so, yeah, it's always something new to discover, participate in. So, yeah.
Thank y'all so much for being here, for asking questions, for being present. Please talk to WJ Lofton after, so that you can know where to get his book. Do you have copies with you? Okay, so you can know where to get his book. And yeah, follow us, talk with us. Thank you guys for coming out. And thank you for Auburn Avenue Research Library for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.